Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be covering my 10 by 14 inch men's shoebox size layout bases. And part of this video is to ask, in the current state that it's in, would people prefer that? Or would you prefer if the parts were a little more, shall we say, refined? And that'll make more sense here in a minute. So let's just dive right into it. And sorry if the neighbor's old vehicle revving engine, you hear it, you know, gotta do what you gotta do. Okay, so what I mean by less refined is the fact that I can only cut parts so large in my laser, and for the side panels, I can't cut them in one piece. So what I've done is I have made them with these interlocking joints that you glue together, and I did a cooking show, and I did this off camera, but realistically, nobody needs to see me doing that. They interface together. It's very simple. Now for the other part, which is the floor of it, that is cut out of 3 separate pieces. And the reason why I did this is I didn't want the joints overlapping for strength reasons. And I figured it was slightly more material efficient as well. So that's why I did what I did. Now, what I mean by more refined is if I had a friend of mine who has a large capacity laser, if I had her cut these as one piece and these 3 as one piece, it would make assembly go a little bit easier. But on the other hand, the parts would be larger, so theoretically shipping would also be more expensive for this. So even if you have zero intentions of buying this, please sound off down below on your thoughts on that. I'm genuinely curious about that. So that aside, let's actually assemble the thing. So like I said, this was pre-glued off camera. I like using Titebond yellow glue. I just use a piece of masking tape on the back to hold the pieces together. Just apply a light amount of glue to it. You don't need a lot. It's just enough to hold the pieces in place. And when you actually glue everything together, that's when you're really doing the structural gluing. Also, I have these very large latex rubber bands, which work incredibly well for holding things together. But if you do have a natural latex allergy, obviously don't use these. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to lay down the parts. I also like to put the glue seam on the inside as long as it's nothing too extreme. It just looks a little better that way. So what I can do is I can take these panels that conveniently have numbers lasered into them. And for the sake of the video, I am just going to put it with the numbers facing the camera. So we have number 2 right here. We have number 3 right here. We have number 1 right here. And don't worry if you accidentally put the parts in the wrong way. You'll notice it really quick. Spin it 180 degrees and you're good to go. So in this current state, it is a little unwieldy, I will admit. One of the drawbacks to it being in multiple pieces. So what I like to do next is carefully insert the brace here and just a little bit of wiggling to align it. So one brace is in. Second brace is in. Then I can take what will become the top panel for the side here and carefully line things up. Don't get frustrated if things kind of get a little bit unwieldy at times. It happens, but they easily enough all slide into place. Okay, cool. So applying pressure, I can fold it down and we have that done. So now we can move on to the ends. That's relatively simple as well. Just put the holes on the bottom, line that guy up, spin this around, pop the other guy on. Now we get to the slightly tricky portion of this, which is applying the rubber band. And this is definitely where things can go from 0 to 100, as they would say, very quickly. So a little patience is involved as well. There we go. If for whatever reason you're having a hard time installing the parts, just flip it back up on end and you should be able to get everything to slide back into place. All right, you're gonna have to bear with the slightly awkward camera angle here, but I have my rubber band and I'm carefully going to apply it to the top. What I'm doing is I'm making sure that the rubber band is in line with these panels here, so it's applying pressure onto a very rigid spot. I slide it in on the bottom, and then I can adjust it down. So you'll see I have the rubber band running right there, and that pretty much locks everything into place. Now you might have areas where the material is bowed ever so slightly. So that's where you can take the second rubber band and carefully apply it in those areas to just hold it in place until the glue has set. So you can kind of sequentially glue around it. So what I like to do is I like to come along with my good old tight bond, and we'll just glue one area at a time. But I just like to come along with it and just apply a nice generous bead, squeezing it into the corners and the braces. As I go along, making sure everything is squeezed together nicely. So because the glue is going to take an absolute eternity to dry out here, we're going to cut the camera. I'm going to set up a heat source to get this to dry a little quicker, and then we'll come back and do the other compartments. But so far, so good. Okay, so we've got this side somewhat glued in so we can move on to the middle. What I've done is I've used 2 rubber bands here, and we still have the external one to hold everything in place. The other thing you will have noticed is I have not glued into the corners yet. I like to do that separately. The main idea is we're just trying to get this thing held together. So same as before. The other thing I will make note of is for the middle portion, it's a good idea not to put glue onto the stiffening ribs yet, because what can happen is the individual pieces will flex up. So once this glue has dried, I'm going to go ahead and glue this side off camera just because, well, it's gluing. It's not rocket science. Then we can flip the thing over and we can apply glue to lock these guys in place. All right, now it is time to glue the braces in. So like I said earlier, the problem is because these are in pieces, they can flex. So what I like to do is just set it down like this. Happen to have some mineral spirits and some paint thinner, and I just use those to push the middle pieces down so that way they will stay in place. And then I'll just come over where the tabs are sticking through, and I just like to apply a small amount of glue there. It's enough to hold everything in place. It does not need to be, you know, the world's most precision job. It just helps. Okay, so we now have the base glued up. What I opted to do is off camera, I came along and I filled in all the areas that didn't have glue yet on the bottom. And on the top, I just took a small amount of glue in the corners there just to hold everything in place. But the main reason why I didn't go heavy with the glue is just because I didn't want to create any problems when gluing the foam in. Now, the foam is something that you supply yourself. I just like to use this 1-inch extruded polystyrene foam, I believe is the correct term. Out here on the West Coast, we have the pink stuff. On the East Coast, they have the blue stuff. You can find green stuff. This is the 1-inch version, which is what fits into here, but obviously use what fits your application. Now to glue it in place, I personally like to use liquid nails for projects. This stuff works really well. It definitely takes some time to dry, but I find it works better bonding foam to foam and foam to wood than Titebond does. And I think it dries a little quicker as well. So what I like to do is just smush a little bit out in here. It does not need an excessive amount, but some in there is definitely a good idea. So what I will do is I will now take the foam, and I did a terrible job X-Acto knife cutting this, mostly to simulate if you did not have a hot wire tool. Although I do recommend getting one of those clicky knives you can pick up for like $1 to $3 for the little disposable ones over at a hardware store. Be very careful with them. They are very sharp, but they cut through the foam like nobody's business. And I also recommend labeling it foam only, so you don't try cutting cardboard boxes with staples and things and mangle the edge and then wonder why your foam edge looks like crap. So we'll just push this guy down into here. I will go get some heavy objects to set on top of here for it to glue, but that concludes building this in the current configuration. Now, like I said at the beginning, I don't care if you have zero intentions of actually buying one of these. Let me know if you think the assembly process is a little bit more complex than something you would feel comfortable handling. Obviously, if this was with solid side pieces and a solid base, it would be a ton easier to assemble. I just want to get a lay of the land before I delve into potentially looking into having an outside source produce parts for this. So, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you here next time on Make It with Calvin.